In 1953, while parents across America buried their infants, government scientists were following the hearses, not to grieve, to collect. The program had a name, Project Sunshine. And by the end of this video, you will understand why they chose something so innocent sounding. But here is what I want you to hold onto right now. The darkest part of this story is not the theft. The darkest part is what the data actually showed, and why that is the real reason it stayed classified for over 40 years. I will tell you before this video ends. Most people alive today have never heard this story exists. Most will not make it to the final minute. The ones who do will never look at the nuclear age the same way again. Today, I am walking you through exactly how the US government, along with Britain, Australia, and Canada, secretly harvested bones from over 1,500 dead infants without a single parent's consent. This is documented. This is real. And when you understand the full picture, it changes everything you thought you knew about the Cold War era. Cold War terror. Cast your mind back to 1953. World War II had ended just 8 years earlier. The United States had already dropped 2 atomic bombs on Japan. Now the Soviet Union had its own nuclear arsenal. The arms race was accelerating faster than the public could see. Nuclear tests were everywhere. Between 1945 and 1980, the United States alone detonated over 1,000 nuclear devices. The Soviets detonated another 700. Britain, France, and China added hundreds more. The atmosphere was being saturated with radioactive particles every few months. Nobody actually knew what all this radiation was doing to human bodies. Scientists had theories, they had models, but they had no real data from actual human tissue. The Atomic Energy Commission, the same body overseeing America's entire nuclear weapons program, decided it was time to find out. The method they chose was so morally staggering it would remain classified for over 40 years. But to understand what they did, you first need to understand the element they were chasing, because what they discovered about it changes everything. And the name of the program, it tells you exactly how certain they were that you would never find out. Project Sunshine. Project Sunshine. That was the name. Not Project Shadow, not Project Fallout. Sunshine. Named with the kind of deliberate innocuousness only governments can pull off with a straight face. The project was launched in 1953 by the Atomic Energy Commission. Its official stated mission: measure the level of radioactive contamination accumulating in human bone tissue around the globe. The scientist in charge was Dr. Willard Libby, a Nobel Prize winner. Libby invented carbon-14 dating, one of the most respected scientific minds of his generation. Under him, Project Sunshine was framed as essential public health research, the kind of work that would protect Americans from long-term nuclear fallout consequences. Sold as protection was actually extraction. They needed human bone samples from across different ages, geographies, and populations. The science was real. The goal was legitimate. The methods were something else entirely. If your mind is already connecting the dots here, hit like and subscribe, because the next 8 minutes are going to disturb you in ways you are not ready for. Before they could collect anything, they had to solve a specific scientific problem, one that led them directly to the bones of infants. And the answer involves an element most people have never thought about, with a property that should fundamentally change how you see nuclear testing: the strontium trap. Here is the science that makes everything else make sense. When a nuclear bomb detonates, it releases hundreds of radioactive byproducts into the atmosphere. One of those byproducts is strontium-90, and strontium-90 has a property that should genuinely terrify you. Your body cannot distinguish between calcium and strontium-90. They are chemically similar enough that your biology treats them identically. When you eat food grown in contaminated soil, vegetables, milk, grains, your body absorbs strontium-90 exactly the way it absorbs calcium, directly into your bones. Strontium-90 has a half-life of 28 years. Once inside your bones, it stays there for nearly 3 decades, emitting low-level radiation directly into your bone marrow, where your body manufactures blood cells. Scientists suspected this was driving elevated rates of leukemia and bone cancer in civilian populations worldwide. But suspicion was not proof. They needed actual human tissue samples to confirm it. They needed to open the bones and look inside. And to get the most sensitive, accurate data possible, they needed something they could not get from adults, something far more specific. The answer is colder than you expect, and it tells you everything about what came next. Why baby bones? So why babies? Why not adults? The answer is pure, cold science, and it makes everything worse. A growing child's bones absorb calcium at a dramatically higher rate than adults. The faster a bone grows, the more it pulls from its surrounding environment. Since strontium-90 mimics calcium, rapidly growing bones absorb far more strontium-90 than fully developed adult bones ever would. Infants were biological Geiger counters, and newborns' bones were a perfect snapshot of fallout at the moment of death. Think of them like canaries in a coal mine. Except instead of detecting toxic gas, their bones were detecting whether nuclear testing was contaminating the global food supply in real time. Project Sunshine scientists concluded they specifically needed bones from fetuses and newborns who had died within their first year of life. The younger, the better. Their bones were the most precise biological indicator available anywhere. Perfect specimens. Here is what made this actionable in 1953. Infant mortality was tragically high. There was no shortage of recently deceased infants, which meant there was no shortage of what the program needed. One country running this kind of program would be disturbing enough on its own. But what Project Sunshine actually became in scope, that is something else entirely. Global network. Project Sunshine was not just an American operation. The Atomic Energy Commission coordinated with scientific institutions across the world. Columbia University in New York became the central coordinating hub. Through a network of hospitals, medical schools, and government health agencies, the program extended into the United Kingdom, Australia, Canada, and beyond. 7 countries, thousands of samples, all classified. In Britain, a parallel program ran simultaneously. British researchers collecting samples from British infant deaths through the National Health Service infrastructure. In Australia, the program operated through university medical departments with direct government coordination. In Canada, similar quiet arrangements were established through academic and hospital networks. This was a globally coordinated effort to map nuclear contamination in human bone. At its documented peak, Project Sunshine had collected over 1,500 bone samples from deceased infants across these countries. Some historians believe the true number is significantly higher when all partner country collections are fully accounted for. The samples were shipped, tested, and the strontium-90 levels mapped across geographies, seasons, and age groups. Science built on a foundation of stolen bones. The data was comprehensive, the research was genuine, but none of this answers the one question that changes the moral character of everything. How did they actually get the bodies? The answer is more direct and more documented than you want it to be. The body collectors. The method varied by country and institution, but the pattern was consistent everywhere. Researchers worked directly with hospitals and coroners. When an infant died and was brought in before the body was released back to the grieving family for burial, samples were taken. Specifically, bone tissue, the femur, the large bone of the upper leg, was the primary target, valued for its size and its high marrow content. Without asking, in documented cases in Australia, entire legs were severed from infant bodies before the remains were returned to parents. In Britain, pathologists participating in the program took samples during routine post-mortems as standard institutional practice. The samples were packaged and shipped, some as far as Columbia University in New York. Parents believed they were burying their whole child. They were not. Internal documents from the period, declassified decades later, show researchers openly discussing the logistics of collection using clinical, detached language. Procurement, specimen acquisition, sample sufficiency, clinical words for unspeakable acts. This was not rogue scientists acting outside their mandate. It was documented institutional policy, coordinated across hospitals, universities, and government agencies across multiple nations. Which brings us to the one thing: 3 letters. That was deliberately never considered, and its absence is what turns this from scientific overreach into something that violates every principle of human dignity we claim to hold. 0 consent. Let us be precise about what happened here, because the word unethical does not begin to cover it. The parents of these 500 infants were never told their children's bodies were being used for scientific research, never told bones were being removed, never given the option to say yes or no. The voluntary consent of the human subject is absolutely essential. In 1953, the Nuremberg Code, established just 6 years earlier in direct response to Nazi medical experiments on unwilling subjects, explicitly required informed consent for any human research. Scientists at the AEC knew about the Nuremberg Code. Internal documents confirm this was discussed. They simply concluded it did not apply to tissue taken from the deceased. But those deceased had names, had families, had parents who had just buried everything they loved. Some parents donated their child's body to science, not knowing what that science meant. They believed their loss might contribute to something meaningful. They were not told about the nuclear program, not told about strontium-90, not told their infant would help measure the consequences of weapons testing. One internal AEC document, declassified in the 1990s, summarized the logistical challenge with chilling precision. Procurement of human specimens is the bottleneck. For 40 years, that sentence stayed buried. The question is how and why. 40 years buried. For decades, Project Sunshine officially did not exist. The program was classified. The data was classified. The methods were classified. Scientists who participated signed secrecy agreements. Hospital administrators who cooperated were bound by institutional arrangements they could not discuss. Classified, 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 classified again. The Cold War provided perfect cover. National security, scientific necessity, the Soviet threat. These phrases could shut down almost any question about ethics before it gained traction. Any query about methodology could be deflected with technical language and security clearances at the highest levels. The research was not just buried. The data was actively being used. The strontium-90 measurements gathered from those 500 infant bones directly informed U.S. nuclear policy. The data shaped how the government understood fallout dispersal across civilian populations. It fed into internal deliberations about nuclear testing treaties at the highest levels of government. The bones of children helped write the policies of nations. The scientists celebrated this research as a genuine achievement. In purely scientific terms, it was. But here is what I promised you at the start. The reason the data was classified was not just embarrassment about the methods. It was something far more specific. Because when the truth finally broke open in the 1990s, it did not just expose a program. It destroyed people who had been grieving the wrong version of their own loss for 40 years. The reckoning. In 1994, President Clinton established the Advisory Committee on Human Radiation Experiments. Its mandate: investigate every instance of the U.S. government conducting radiation research on human beings without their knowledge or consent. What they uncovered exceeded what anyone in the public had anticipated. 500 babies. Project Sunshine was officially confirmed. Documents were declassified. Scientists testified. And for the first time, families who had buried their children in the 1950s, 60s, and 70s, families who had lived with that grief for decades and moved forward, learned what had actually happened to the bodies they buried. Some families learned their children had been buried with limbs secretly removed. Imagine burying your child, living with that loss for 40 years, then receiving official correspondence informing you that the body you buried was incomplete, that the government had taken pieces of your baby without asking, that you never knew. This happened to real families, real parents still alive when the letters arrived. An apology cannot restore what was taken or undo 40 years of grieving the wrong version of goodbye. The government expressed formal regret, said it would not happen again, but words are not bones. Do you think the scientists who ran Project Sunshine were heroes of public health, or should they have faced criminal charges? Comment heroes or criminals. And if this story disturbs you, send this to anyone who deserves to know the truth today. This story was buried for 40 years. Do not let it stay buried. The buried truth. Here is what I promised you at the beginning, not just what they took, but what the data showed that made classifying it so critical. Strontium-90 levels in infant bones during the peak years of nuclear testing were significantly elevated across every country tested. Every single one. The more nuclear tests conducted in a given period, the higher the strontium-90 concentrations in the infant bones from that same period. The bones proved what governments denied. The data was a direct scientific indictment of nuclear testing programs worldwide. Project Sunshine proved that atmospheric nuclear testing was contaminating the global food supply and entering human bone tissue at measurable, harmful levels, especially in children. This was the data that ultimately powered the scientific argument for the 1963 Partial Nuclear Test Ban Treaty, the agreement that ended most atmospheric nuclear testing on Earth. And here is the unbearable irony at the center of this entire story. The data gathered from these collections contributed directly to the policy arguments that helped end the contamination that made those collections seem necessary. The government did not classify the program solely out of embarrassment. They classified it because the findings proved guilt. Every nuclear test they ran was poisoning the children of the world, and now they had the evidence in hand. The truth is always stranger than anything you could make up. Comment Sunshine if you made it to the end. You are now part of a small group who knows this story. Do not let it stop here. Every parent who lost a child in the 1950s trusted that, in their worst moment, the world would at least treat their child with dignity. Project Sunshine violated that trust. Coordinated, deliberate, and global. Trust broken, dignity, stolen science, weaponized. What happened was not the work of monsters operating in dark basements. It was carried out by Nobel Prize-winning scientists, by respected institutions, by governments that genuinely believed they were protecting national security and public health. That is not a defense. It is a warning about how ordinary people commit extraordinary violations when given institutional permission and a classified label to hide behind. The most dangerous experiments are the ones that feel justified at the time. The 500 babies of Project Sunshine never got to grow up. Their bones were taken, catalogued, filed away in laboratories, and used to shape nuclear policy at the highest levels of government. It does not make it right. Nothing makes it right. The world is a dangerous place, not because of those who do evil, but because of those who look on and do nothing. If you made it to the end of this video, comment Sunshine below. You are now part of a small group who carries this story. The families of those 500 infants never got to know what happened. You do. Do not let it stay buried. The truth is stranger than anything you could make up. If your brain is as disturbed as mine right now, hit subscribe, because next time it gets even darker. The truth is stranger than anything you could make up. Subscribe to keep discovering.